Fog filled the streets of London. A woman was walking alone. She had no idea she was about to be the next victim. Could the killer be a doctor, or a police officer, or even someone close to the victims? Killer without an identity, victims without mercy, and a mystery that remains unsolved to this day.
The story of the serial killer Jack the Ripper is considered one of the most mysterious and famous murder cases in human history. Dozens of books have been written about it, and many films, television programs, and novels have been produced. In 1888, the city of London witnessed a series of the most brutal murders ever recorded. The perpetrator was a mysterious individual, believed to have been a mentally disturbed man with no clear or understandable motive. Most researchers believe that Jack the Ripper murdered 5 victims, known as the canonical 5, while others argue that he may have been responsible for the deaths of at least 11 people. All 5 victims were poor women who worked as prostitutes in the Whitechapel area. At the time, terror spread throughout the city after the police completely failed to identify the killer or stop him. Despite numerous investigations and attempts, despite the great efforts that were made, no one was able to uncover the killer's identity, so much so that the chief of police and the Home Secretary were forced to resign from their positions because of this disastrous failure. Welcome, and let us begin together the journey of telling the story of the most dangerous serial killer in the history of England, Jack the Ripper. At the time, the Whitechapel area was crowded and impoverished, home to many of London's poorest residents. Its streets were full of filth, unpleasant odors were everywhere, and addiction and alcoholism were highly visible. Life in this district was extremely harsh, which drove many women to turn to prostitution as a way to escape poverty. Among these women was Mary Nichols, the first official victim of Jack the Ripper. Mary worked as a maid in London, but her alcoholism prevented her from keeping any job for long. After being dismissed from her last position, she moved into a shared lodging house for the poor. On the night of the 30th of August, 1888, Mary faced a difficult situation, as she did not have enough money to pay her rent for that night. So, at around 11 p.m., she went out into the streets of Whitechapel, attempting to earn money through prostitution. On the way, she met her friend Ellen Holland, who tried to convince her to go back home because it was late. The time was approaching 2 a.m. But Mary, intoxicated, paid no attention and left her friend, continuing on her way. Less than an hour after this encounter, Mary Nichols' body was found. At the time, the murder of a woman working in prostitution was not unusual in Whitechapel, but what caused terror was the manner of her death. Her throat had been completely slashed, her abdomen cut open, and her internal organs removed. About a week later, on September 8, the second victim, Annie Chapman, was found. Annie resembled Mary in many ways. She was addicted to alcohol, lived in a shared lodging house, and worked as a prostitute. She was found slashed, her abdomen opened. However, this crime was even more horrifying, as the killer placed some of her organs on her shoulders after killing her. During the autopsy, it was discovered that part of her bladder was missing, and it is believed that the killer kept it as a souvenir. Forensic Dr. George Baxter Phillips noted that the precise way the organs had been removed suggested that the murderer had medical knowledge, as he had removed the uterus with great skill. On September 27, the Central News Agency received a letter believed to be from the killer, which read, "Dear Sir, I hear a lot that the police have caught me, but this is not true. I laugh when they pretend to be clever and claim they are on the right track. When you accused John Pizer, I laughed from the bottom of my heart. I hate prostitutes, and will not stop tearing them apart until you catch me. My last work was a pride, and I didn't give the woman a chance even to scream. How will you catch me? I love my work and wish to start again. I took some of her blood in a bottle to use as ink, but it was too thick. Red ink will suffice. Next time I will cut off the ear of the woman I kill and send it to you. Good luck, Jack the Ripper. And I don't mind if you call me that. They say I have become a doctor now. Ha ha ha. The letter was not published until October 1. Although many believe that journalists had fabricated the letter to boost newspaper sales, the name stuck in people's minds from that moment, and the killer became known as Jack the Ripper. Just 3 days later, in the early hours of September 30, 2 murders occurred in one night. A cab driver named Lloyd R. Dempster was driving through a narrow, dark alley in Whitechapel when he noticed something suspicious. When he got out of his cab and entered the alley, he found the body of Elizabeth Stride. Her throat was slashed, but her body was still warm and showed no mutilation, suggesting that the killer had been interrupted by the cab's arrival and fled before completing his crime. However, this did not satisfy his ego. Less than an hour later, about 1.5 kilometers away, the body of Catherine Eddowes was found in Mitre Square. She had been slashed, her abdomen opened, internal organs removed, her left kidney and most of her uterus had been taken, and her face had been horribly mutilated. Police found an apron stained with blood on Golston Street, above which was writing implying that Jews were responsible for the crimes. To prevent riots, Police Commissioner Charles Warren ordered the writing to be erased before dawn. The next day, another letter arrived at the police station in handwriting similar to the first, claiming to be from Jack the Ripper. 2 weeks later, George Lusk received a package containing half a human kidney preserved in alcohol, along with a letter titled, "From Hell." About 3 weeks later, the last known victim, Mary Jane Kelly, was found. She was the youngest of the victims, aged 25. This crime was notable because it occurred inside her rented room, giving the killer time and freedom to commit the murder. The last person seen with her was a man named George Hutchinson, who reported seeing her speaking with a well-dressed man of apparent upper-class background. The next morning, her body was discovered on the bed, horrifically mutilated. The landlord, after seeing the scene, said, "What I saw cannot be forgotten. Whoever did this is not human, but a demon." Since that crime, Jack the Ripper disappeared. His identity remains a mysterious, unsolved enigma to this day. The level of mutilation had reached such an extent that it was impossible to recognize her features. As with the previous victims, her abdomen was opened, and her internal organs were scattered, but this time the difference was that her heart was completely missing from the crime scene. Despite disagreements among researchers, Mary Jane Kelly is considered the last official victim of Jack the Ripper. Most theories suggest that the murders stopped either because of his death, his departure from London, his imprisonment, or simply because he abandoned killing. Jack the Ripper's crimes put the London police in an extremely difficult position. This type of crime was unfamiliar to them, and the investigators could not find any real evidence left behind by the killer. Furthermore, the murders took place in one of the most dangerous areas of London at the time, and the lack of trust between Whitechapel residents and the police significantly hindered the investigations. At one point, the police suspected that the murders might have been committed by a criminal gang operating in the area, especially since many of the women working in prostitution were associated with gangs. It was assumed that the goal was either to punish those who disobeyed orders or to instill fear in others. This suspicion was reinforced by an incident that occurred several months before the Ripper murders. On the 4th of April, 1888, when Emma Smith was attacked in the street, sustaining injuries to her face and losing part of her ear. In 1903, Chief Inspector of the Criminal Investigation Department, Melville Macnaghten, compiled a list of 3 suspects, but many were unconvinced, as the descriptions of the killer fit far more people. Below is a list of the most prominent suspects in the Jack the Ripper case. 1. John Pizer, a Polish-Jewish man who worked as a bootmaker in Whitechapel. Residents accused him of extorting and threatening women in prostitution. His name appeared in one of Jack the Ripper's letters, but he had an alibi for the time of the murders, so he was quickly eliminated. 2. George Chapman, born in Poland, trained in surgery, and emigrated to England shortly before the murders. He worked as a barber in Whitechapel and was the main suspect of Inspector Frederick Aberline. Later, he poisoned 3 of his wives and was executed in 1903. He was excluded as a suspect because he preferred poisoning, not stabbing. 3. Francis Tumblety, an Irish-American conman who claimed to be an herbal doctor. He was known for his extreme hatred of women and prostitutes and kept preserved female genitalia. He was arrested in London in 1888 for sexual deviance, fled to America, and was never extradited. His name remains discussed to this day. Aaron Kosminski, a Polish-Jewish barber from Whitechapel who suffered from severe mental disorders. He was committed to an asylum after the last murder and died in 1919. In 2007, writer Russell Edwards claimed that DNA analysis of a shawl belonging to victim Catherine Eddowes linked him to the crime, but the analysis was considered scientifically unreliable. Montague John Druitt, a lawyer interested in surgery. His mother had been institutionalized shortly before the murders. His body was found floating in the Thames on the 3rd of December, 1888. The murders stopped after his death, raising suspicion. Joseph Barnett, the most controversial suspect. He lived with and loved Mary Jane Kelly and hated her work in prostitution. Many believe he committed the murders to frighten her into quitting, which she did temporarily, but returned when she ran out of money. They had a violent quarrel 10 days before her murder, during which a window was broken. No signs of forced entry were recorded, and her clothes were folded beside the bed, suggesting she had been asleep and that the killer had been present earlier. The indisputable fact is that after the murder of Mary Jane Kelly, the killing stopped. Did Jack the Ripper die? Was he imprisoned? Or was he one of these suspects, leaving the secret buried forever? And so, we reach the end of this terrifying story. Write your opinions in the comments. And if you would like me to tell a particular story, leave it in the comments as well. The story that gets the most engagement, I will narrate it. Show me your enthusiasm. Like, subscribe, and share the video with anyone you think would enjoy this type of content. I'll see you next time with a story even more thrilling than the last.